What's up, guys? It's Q&A time on December 16th, 2018. Was supposed to be training-related Q&A this week, but I post the topics sometimes. I'm not sure anyone actually reads the topics. They just see the photo that I always post, and they put up their questions, which is okay. That's fine. A couple of the questions are training-related, and a couple of them are not training-related at all, so it is what it is. All right, so first one is we'll just go over to Facebook. What are the most common injuries you see clients try and push through that tend to cause more harm than good? Okay, common injuries. Well, I could put a little spin on that. I mean, you could kind of look at it two different ways. First off, sicknesses. I mean, you could consider being sick or being run down or being overtrained or stressed or all those things as injuries, I guess. I think people probably train through those more often than they should, or those situations more often than they should. So I could definitely add that to the list. Now, in terms of like actual physical injuries, probably just chronic pains that people don't address. If you're having a chronic pain, whether it's a joint pain or something, just not ignoring it. I think too many people try to work around things instead of figuring out the origin of the issue and, addressing that. Give you an example. I'm not giving you specific injuries necessarily, but I'll give you an example of what I mean. Something like a sore neck pain or low back pain or even shoulder pain. Okay, so shoulder pain, I would say that's pretty common, or low back pain, that's probably a relatively common one. So a lot of these things usually don't originate at the location that they hurt. They typically originate somewhere else. So finding the origin, whether you're going to a good soft tissue therapist or chiropractor, somebody that's a professional that's able to identify those things, that's going to be helpful. Usually correcting some kind of muscular imbalance, structural imbalance, something that is causing the issue to be reoccurring. A shoulder pain, for example, could just be tight pec minor, or something that's rotating, the shoulder forward, and you might need to, it could originate in the rhomboid, or like I said, it could be a tight pec minor. You could have shoulder pain in the front that originates in the rhomboid, originates in the lat or something, because there's a weakness in one area. So I mean, again, I'd say probably just trying to identify the origin of the issues, and inquiring with somebody that is a professional, and not just posting it, not just posting on the internet. Hey guys, I have shoulder pain, help me out. Yeah, you might be able to figure out some exercises and things to work around it, and some warm up, some rehab, and some prehab, and things of those, along those lines. But that's not really, correcting the issues, or somebody just telling you take a bunch of TB500 or healing peptides. It's not really gonna solve anything. So next one, if you had to pick any training partner for the rest of your life, who would it be? Oh my goodness. I don't know. Well, depends on the day, kind of mood I'm in, I guess. I mean, people that I probably enjoy training with aren't necessarily the people that I should be training with, just because I know the capacity of my nervous system and what it's capable of, and I know that it's just not capable of getting just beat to pieces every day, which that's how I enjoy training, and I enjoy that. Like I said, I do enjoy that, but I probably shouldn't train with one of those those types of people, just because it wouldn't be super productive. Somebody just sitting there and screaming at me the whole time, that sounds cool, but probably wouldn't do me any good. Man, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I've had some good training partners. I guess somebody that's close to me in terms of strength and things that we can kind of feed off each other in that way. I will say this. I guess I don't know who because I don't really look up or idolize anyone, or, you know, in terms of training. So I have a hard time picking out a person, but I could give you characteristics of a training partner. I would like somebody that's a hard worker and that can really unload on those sets when we need to, but I also like somebody that is methodical with training, and I like people that are quiet, really. I don't mind in terms of during sets and stuff, you know, yelling, screaming, cussing, whatever, that's cool. I do all that stuff myself, and I don't see any issues with that. But in terms of like between that, it's kind of in anyone that's had a training partner like this, they understand it. Outside of the actual sets, you're very, very quiet, and it's like this silent communication back and forth. You have this groove and you jive with them, even though you're not necessarily saying a whole lot other than we're doing this. So those are kind of the people that I like to train with. Might not be somebody that everyone likes to train with. They might like someone a little more verbal, but that's just kind of what I enjoy and do well with. So next one, how do you personally view periodization and how do you implement it? Okay. I mean, I view periodization as it's a great tool, but I don't have a set method of periodization. So, and I've talked about this a lot of times, and talked about this in podcasts and other Q&As. It's just the idea of a standardized way of periodization is very faulty, in my opinion. You can't have a standardized system of periodization, because everyone is very individual. So that wouldn't really, it's not really going to work. So yeah, periodization is great, but it's more so just periodize when you need to. Upregulate when you can, when the environment allows, when stress is low, when you're able to, when you feel good, when time allows. And downregulate when you are burnt out and you need to back off, or life schedules prohibit something, or, so that I periodize as necessary, and I don't have set periodization. Now, for a strength athlete, may have a little bit more of a set periodization, but I mean, you still have to auto-regulate. You still have to have some biofeedback built into the program, the communication between client and coach, to really successfully periodize, or successfully alter a program, I guess I could say. So, all right, last one on the Facebook thread is, it's a two-parter. Second one's a little more in depth, and I think a little more useful of a question. So we'll just do that one. Okay. I'm interested in understanding if there is anything you would use or have used pre-workout for nutrient partitioning, such as a fast-acting insulin or GDA, and why would one adopt this approach over post-workout only? Do you feel it's an effective approach? So I'm not sure if they're asking whether or not it would be more effective to use pre and post-workout over just post-workout. But okay, so the easiest way to approach the question, basically exogenous insulin use is just going to be matching, you're going to be able to use whatever amount in accordance with how much blood glucose you have, so normally rapid insulin, you're talking about using it around mealtime or around, an influx of carbohydrates or influx of glucose. So that's going to be what determines how much of the insulin is used. Use too much, you're going to go hypoglycemic. Yeah, your body has mechanisms that are going to help pump out glucose to match that. We're not going to talk about all that, but for practical purposes, you have an amount of insulin that's going to be used with an amount, a certain amount of glucose intake. And that ratio is going to depend on the person. It could be something like one IU of rapid insulin for every 10 grams of carbohydrates. That's the really common one that you hear a lot of people cite on forums and things like that. That's not by any means necessarily the ratio for everybody. You'd have to test postprandial glucose. You have to kind of figure out where your ratio is at. But anyhow, back to this. If it's a rapid insulin, I mean, yeah, you could use it both pre and post. There could be some overlap there a little bit, depending on which analog is used. It might be open. The insulin might be open for a little while, and kind of bleed over a little bit into the post-workout dose potentially. But it's not, I mean, it's very realistic to do both. So, especially if you're using it with a pre-workout meal. Now, if you're using it pre-workout and then post-workout, obviously that's going to push that pre-workout and then post-workout dose closer together. So, is there an advantage? I mean, not really. I mean, you're going to partition nutrients pretty well during training anyhow, whether or not you're using, exogenous glucose or not. It's really going to provide a pretty similar benefit to as it would any other time. It's just going to assist the pancreas. It's going to give you readily available quick insulin, not tax the pancreas as much to have to produce as much insulin if you're using like a huge dose of intra-workout carbohydrates. But I mean, a normal insulin sensitive individual is going to be able to produce enough of their own endogenous insulin anyhow. So what's the advantage? Well, the advantage is it's just repetition. It's just pounding that pancreas over time. You're getting your advantage. The advantage is you're getting the extra nutrient partitioning, and you're getting the kind of, saving your pancreas effect through continued exogenous insulin use. Do it over and over and over again. You're going to save your pancreas in the long haul versus it having to pump out that insulin on its own. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's not really a huge advantage between one timing or the other. Do both if you could. You could do both if you could. Now, they ask, when would HGH come into play with this setup? Probably pre-workout is going to be the most realistic. It's going to raise your blood glucose some. You could put it into that pre-workout scenario there. That's going to also change that ratio of carbs to, or glucose to insulin, because you have the extra boost in glucose from the GH. So yeah, but the reason I say pre-workout is because you can get some of that autocrine and paracrine IGF production, and that's going to be the case if you're doing an intramuscular. If there's some good reads out there, I suggest looking at, like, Chester Rockwell has a great article on application here and talks about the differences between subcutaneous and intramuscular and where the advantage might lie. Yeah, a lot of it's going to go systemic regardless, because people say, oh, it's going to go systemic, it doesn't matter. But there has been some literature showing that there could be some potential benefit of the autocrine and paracrine production if you do the intramuscular. So in theory, you would just go into whatever area you're focusing on in your training, or at least one of the areas, and split it bilaterally, and then couple that with the exogenous growth hormone, and that's when you have your synergy. The one by itself, it's not going to produce hypertrophy, but together they will. So, yeah, I think that pretty much covers the question. Asking, is there an advantage? No, not really. Use the exogenous insulin at both times if you could. And then where would the GH come into the setup? Yeah. And then that's obviously only talking about one instances of the GH dosing. It could be done multiple times throughout the day in small amounts, because again, ideally you don't want a lot of it to go systemic. You want a lot of it to be, I don't want to use the word localized, but that's essentially what it is when I talk about the autocrine paracrine production with the intramuscular. So it's localized is an easy way to think of it. So I think that covers it. If you have any specific follow-ups, just let me know. That's going to be related. There will also be related to how big is the window between pre-workout meal, intra-workout carbohydrates, post-workout meal, where the dosings take place in there. Like I said, there could be some overlap in how long that insulin is open and whether or not you can do pre and post workout and how you want to time that. It could be pre-workout and post-workout. It could be pre-workout meal and post-workout to have a long enough gap in there. It's kind of a timing issue there. So that would obviously depend on the person's approach to nutrition and intra-workout nutrition in that case. But again, just to recap that, pre-workout is going to be fine. Pre and post would maybe be better, potentially. Pre-workout, GH, intramuscular, bilaterally. I think that covers it pretty much. Okay. All right. Next one. Okay. Next one is on Instagram, so we'll jump over to that thread. Sorry, I didn't have it open. Looks like first one is do you personally prefer that people consume real sugar versus artificial sweeteners simply from a digestion standpoint, or do you think digestion is only affected from artificial sweeteners when people hit their individual tolerance? Well, yeah, you really answered your own question. I mean, when they hit the individual tolerance, and then we can have some GI distress. There's really not any way to know other than take too much of it and upset your stomach. That's not really the ideal situation, but I mean, that could be one way to find, or probably the only way to find your upper end of tolerance. There's no, not really any way to map that out. Otherwise, it does vary a lot. Some people, they drink 1 can of diet soda. Excuse me. They drink 1 can of diet soda and they have GI distress. Other people can drink a 2 liter of diet soda a day and not have any problems. So again, it just depends. From a digestion standpoint, I mean, there's people that have digestive issues with refined sugars as well. So, I mean, kind of a double-edged sword. I understand the premise of the question. I get why you're asking it, because it's not, it's not an artificial sweetener. But really, it's, if you have the caloric parameters and you have the macros that allow you to use the sugar in the diet, if you want to use, naturally occurring sugars, they might digest a little bit better. I hate the word natural sugar. It's a ridiculous term because of the way people use it. But, sugars from fruits or sugars from foods that occur naturally that aren't refined. Yeah, they might digest a little bit better. It's all sugar at the end of the day. It's all 4 calories per gram, more or less. It's all going to digest relatively similar. So no, I don't really think the two are related. I know some people say real sugar is better than artificial sweeteners, but really a person's probably using, in the context of a bodybuilder that's tracking their macronutrients and that has a set plan, they're probably using artificial sweeteners like in between meals as like a diet drink or something, or in to flavor supplements, or they might be using a little bit in a meal to flavor something slightly versus using regular sugar. Now, if it does upset them and they need to potentially reduce the carbohydrate amount in the meal and then add a little bit of real sugar in there to sweeten it, that could be a way to do it. Like I add things like organic raw honey and stuff like that into plans. I do use fruit a little bit in people's plans as well. So, I mean, things like that are great. But again, you don't always necessarily have the calories that are going to allow that. If you're using even just a small amount, like 10 grams of sugar in a meal. I mean, 10 grams of your carbs is a lot when you only have 50 in a day or 60 or something. You know, I mean, it's like, I don't really want to use 10 grams. I want to eat some more vegetables or something. So, yeah, kind of a context-related question. Okay. Clomid on cycle recommended. My girlfriend and I want a little one, and I'm willing to do whatever. Would it suffice, or is it Nolvadex also recommended to add? So I asked as well, are they talking about a cruise dose? So they're talking about a cruise, so like a we'll just say hormone replacement situation. Now, regardless of hormone dose, you're still, if you were to draw, and I've actually had this question before, if you were to look at lab work, you're going to see luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone are pretty much going to be zero because you're taking an exogenous hormone. Your body doesn't need to have stimulating hormones because you are taking the hormone. So those signaling pathways are pretty much kind of like thyroid. You know, you're going to have a low TSH when you're taking exogenous thyroid hormone because you don't need thyroid stimulating hormone because you're taking thyroid hormone. So there's no need to stimulate the gland to do anything really. Okay, so man, I don't think there's a good answer to this other than what, you know, people ask, well, would you be able to conceive? Well, maybe. There's plenty of people that do it during full-blown cycles. Not that they necessarily intend to, but it happens, or they think that they're sterile and they think that they're not fertile, and they, you know, it ends up happening. You can always go to some kind of fertility clinic and check sperm count and check sperm motility and see where things are at if you wanted to do that route, and then decide whether or not you needed any kind of additional medication or supplementation to help. You could go that route, or just see what happens. Most people have, most of the more progressive fertility protocols, I guess you would call it, seem to like to recommend HCG and HMG together. So those are probably things that you'd want to look into. And then I've seen some of them add Clomid, and I could see why they may add a SERM in there, a selective estrogen receptor modulator, SERM. But most of them seem to use HCG and HMG together. So that seems to be where the science is at in terms of fertility protocols right now. Excuse me. Now, another portion of people in this situation may have to come off completely. That's just the fact of the matter, and they might feel like shit, but they can have at least enough sperm production to get the job done, you know, short term. Man, it's just hard to say outside of, like I said, just going and getting it checked. Okay. All right, guys, I had to move spots. My dogs would not leave me alone, so we are locked and loaded. Get the last couple questions done. Last few questions, maybe. Let's see. Occlusion training, not necessarily its effectiveness, but when would be a good time to use it, and duration to keep the bands on even after said exercise is performed. Okay, so good time to use it. Great time's injuries. Anyone that has any kind of injuries going on, it's a great way to reduce, great way to reduce overall load that the person needs to use. So of course they can still get a good stimulus without loading, without loading as much weight on there. And let's see, good times. Yeah, I mean, if you just wanted to do some like metabolite type training, just get a crazy pump. Yeah, I mean, it works for sure. But reducing the taxing load on the joints, I think, is just a great time to use it. Let's see. Leave the bands on. Leave them on until you're done with the exercises that you're doing them with. If you're doing like a supersets or giant sets or anything like that, you can just leave them on through the whole giant set rotation and then take them off at the end. Same with supersets, same with exercise. If you're just doing straight sets, you're doing 5 sets of 10, leave them on the whole time. Yeah, in almost all the protocols, at least all the ones I've seen from actual research, they all left them on the entire time. So there's no need to take them off until you're done with the exercises. And if you're going to do multiple exercises, I would do them probably pretty close together. I wouldn't say, let's see, for example, I wouldn't do, if you're going to do, we'll give you an arm exercise. I got arms as an example. People already choose. Let's do legs. That's an easier one. So if you're going to do leg exercise, you're going to do occluded leg extensions and you're going to do occluded leg curls. I wouldn't do occluded leg curls, then take them off, do squats, and then do occluded leg extensions. Just do your squats, or probably, yeah, do your squats first and then do your, do your leg extensions, the leg curls after that, and together as a superset, or separately, but just leave the bands on. Okay, so next one. Okay, let's see. Thoughts on YK11, an ideal dose for noticeable muscle tissue growth. Man. All right, so dosages normally in the 10 to 20 milligram range, 20 being the higher, 10 being the lower, obviously. So, I mean, you're going to get an effect in any dose range. I mean, you're going to get an effect if you take 5 milligrams. It's just you're going to get more if you take 20, probably, just like anything else. So, that's just, think of it like that. I mean, it's going to be effective probably in 10. It's going to be effective in the 10 milligram range for most people. It is pretty strong. I think that they ask pros and cons. Well, I mean, one of the things is it's a hormone. It's pretty much a DHT, and it's not. I don't know that it has some SARM-like properties, but it's going to be a lot closer to a traditional type of anabolic in terms of just the side effects. When I say side effects, how it's going to hit your health markers. It's going to affect your lipids and it's not methylated, so that's a plus. But how it's going to affect you in terms of health markers is going to be closer to traditional like DHT type compounds. So yeah, that's probably the cons of it. Really, is people think, oh, it's a SARM, and they compare it to something like ostarine, which also can impact your health markers, which also can impact your hormonal axis, but it's not in the same realm. It's not very strong, so the side effects aren't also not as strong. So, but yeah, 10 to 20 milligrams, pretty typical dosing. So, all right, guys, this video is ran. I'm almost out of storage space, actually, so we're done. All right, guys, I will see you all next week.